Hi everybody, Jake here for FMSCOUT, and in today's video we're going to be answering your burning Football Manager questions. We've used YouTube and our social media pages to collate a few questions that you guys have asked about Football Manager. We're going to reel off some quick fire answers. Hopefully this will be useful for everyone, even people who might not have had a question originally might see some of these questions, learn something and go, oh, awesome. So yeah, that's the aim of today's video. If you like this kind of content, hit the like button, it really means a lot to us. Comment down below your questions in case we do a part 2 to this. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and you can find my channel linked in the description. But with that being said, let's get into question number 1. Okay, so the first question comes from Proton Chief. He asks, where can I find a pass map in the data hub? Well, I'm not really a data hub user myself, but we'll see what we can figure out from here. As far as I'm aware, you can see a shop map in the team section just by searching through, which is a cool feature that they've added in Football Manager this year. So instead of shop map, I'm going to try pass map, and there you go, straight away. Pass map for the Bundesliga last match has came up. Now, this is showing me the passing lanes, which seems about right. We play a vertical tiki-taka, so a lot of stuff does go through the middle, so that looks right to me. You will notice, so it does say advanced analysis here. This is showing that because of our high quality analyst resources, we're getting a good report here. I don't know if it doesn't appear for you guys, there's a chance maybe you haven't got enough analysts to get this kind of thing, but I would imagine even with the basic analysts, a pass map would be the kind of thing they could generate. I could be wrong, but that is where you find it if you want to get a pass map. Our next question comes from FPL Grim on Twitter, and he asks, why does the opposition always score when you praise your team? Now, this is something I'm sure we've all experienced in Football Manager. You do a shout to raise your team's morale, get under your team's skin, whatever it might be, and it goes the opposite way and has a negative effect. Now, there is a great video on the FMSCOUT channel from Leo Demas a few weeks ago, I think it was, about the best shouts in game and what are the best shouts to use and when to use them. So I would definitely say check that out. But what I would say about that praising question is don't do it too often because that's going to cause an issue. And also don't do it to your team if you're 1 goal ahead. I tend to find it works best if you're 2 or 3 goals ahead. And even then I'd focus it on the individuals. When you do your shout, there's a drop down that says individuals and you can choose specific players. For example, if Maxen Lacroix here makes a great tackle for our team or scores a header from a corner, I'll praise him as opposed to praising the whole team. And that seems to be more successful because then you're not risking some of the players not understanding why they're being praised and it causing them to drop their heads. By the way, if you do want to check out this save we're using, this is a save on my channel, my Wolfsburg save. You can find that linked in the description. A lot of you guys have came over and I've really enjoyed it. So if you enjoyed the look of this, feel free to come check it out and drop me a subscribe on there. But that leads me on to question number 3, which is one that I get asked all the time, and a very simple one. Jake, what skin is this? This is the FM22 Vince skin. If you search that on Google, you will find plenty of downloads for it. It's VINCE, Vince, the FM22 Vince skin. I really like it. I think it looks very sleek. The next question comes from The Grandum on Twitter. He says, do you sign Wonderkids with less than 10 in their determination attribute? This is something that depends on the way that you guys want to play Football Manager. No one's going to stop you having a Wonderkid under 10 determination. They could still do a good job for you and it's your decision at the end of the day. If you want to avoid it, there's a few good reasons to back up why you wouldn't want to have a Wonderkid or a player, in fact, with that low determination, but it's not the be all and end all in my opinion. This isn't a player that I've signed, but this guy came out of our academy, Kenneth Wynn, and he's one of the best players we've had as a youth prospect so far. 5-star potential goalkeeper. He's never let me down yet. He's developing nicely. He trains well. He doesn't come up in the red boxes in terms of the poor training ratings or anything like that. So I've got no issue with this guy, and I wouldn't have known that he only had 2 determinations. So I wouldn't always rule it out, but I would imagine over the years, Kenneth Wynn, maybe his development will be slow, whatever it might be, and that might cause a lack of growth in that sense. But I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. I just take it into mind when you are going to sign someone. But of course, the beauty of Football Manager is that you can play in whatever way you want, so don't listen to me if you don't want to. Okay, this next question is quite an interesting concept. This is from Slim Slayer on Twitter. He says he has problems with low release clauses in his league, the Swedish First Division. Is there any way around it? Now, I would say that is part and parcel of Football Manager and the way it works, because with most cases, particularly if you're buying young players, they'll want a release clause in their contract if they're joining a club in the Swedish Division, purely because that's unlikely to be the pinnacle of their career, so they want it in their contract that they have a release clause. Now, I imagine this guy is still probably in the first few years of his save, and that's when this problem seems the most ripe. And that's because, of course, your team hasn't developed yet, and therefore the players are less likely to want to stick around. You have it in a lot of cases. I had it even here at Wolfsburg. Most players that we signed wanted a release clause, and you kind of just have to accept it if you really want a certain player. You can always try and remove and exclude, but if they've already put it in the contract, sometimes it just has to be there. So put it to the highest value you can and use it to your advantage. So Karim Adeyemi, we signed knowing he was good, but he did have a release clause, but I was fine with it because I knew we were getting a great player. But the bonus of actually bringing that player to the club is, once they've been there a few months and they're happy and the club is performing well, you can usually offer them a new deal and either raise that release clause or get rid of it completely. That's what I've done with every player at the end of the first season of Wolfsburg, and I've never had a release clause since, because the better the club does, the less likely they are to want to leave, so they don't want a release clause. It makes sense, but because you're in a Swedish division, it might take a little bit more time to get your club to that level where they consider this like a pinnacle of their career and they might not want a release clause, but just bear with and eventually you'll get there. The next question comes from Ewan Crook, and he says, what is the best way to control player wages escalating? Now, this is quite interesting because I think the way that we play Football Manager as players, 9 times out of 10, every season your club is probably developing in terms of going up the league or developing their facilities, whatever it might be, the players that you bring in, your team will generally be getting better. It's a game after all, so if you do things right, most of the time you'll end up winning and doing well with your club. Now that in turn is going to lead to better players asking for bigger deals, and I wouldn't say it's a bad thing that your contracts are escalating in terms of prices, because as you get to a bigger club, as your club develops, that thing should be expected. But of course there are ways to stop your contract escalating on the whole, and to that I would say if we were going to offer Cohen Casteels here a contract, if he had the clause in, where is it, yearly wage rise, I always try and get rid of this, even if it means removing excluding and then adding $5,000 onto his wage to get him to accept. Seems like a big jump, but if you think about this over, let's say this was a 4-year deal for Cohen Casteels, he had $66,000 which it was on, and he was on a 10% yearly wage rise. You might not think much of it, but next year that's going to add $6,000 onto his contract. It's going to be $72,000. Then it's adding another 10% on, another 10% on. For that whole 4 years, by the end of it, you'll be looking at $80,000 plus. Again, this doesn't seem like a massive jump, but if this is in 10 of your 30-player squad contract, all of their wages are going to be increasing year on year and piling in that way. So I always look to remove those yearly wage rise clauses. Now we've got another one that I'm going to give a fairly vague answer to, so I do apologise in advance. But the question was, what is the best individual training regime to get the most noticeable attribute changes? I do not believe there is a best individual training regime. Again, Leia Demis did a great video on a lot more detail. It's 20 plus minutes long about individual training and the best ways to do it, when to do it. But for me, there's 3 key ways of doing individual training: to either focus on a weakness of a player, enhance a strength of a player, or just try and balance a player out. There is no one size fits all individual training, because each player you're going to want to have something different developed into them. I think that makes sense. That's why it's individual training and not team training. So in this case, I might decide Adeyemi's a great finisher, I want him to be an even better finisher, but the way that I tend to do things is focus on the weaknesses. So here, his training, he's focusing on his role. I'll always do that because I think it's a great thing to do. Starts to highlight the attributes he's going to need for that position, and that's a great thing to train. But I might see him and say, wow, his heading's a bit low. So in here, I'll go to additional focus. I'll focus on his heading, which isn't being trained specifically in his role as it's not highlighted. So there you go. I focused on the aerial ability of him, and that's going to start upgrading his heading, because out of everything, that's probably his biggest weakness as a striker in this game. But again, it's all about how you want to do the individual training. In terms of your intensity and what's the best intensity, that's going to depend on what training you're doing with the whole club, the whole training as opposed to the individual training. So I know that is a vague answer, but there is no one size fits all best individual training. It's all about the individual player and what you want to do with them. Okay, on to our final few questions now. Don't forget to like the video if you do enjoy, because this is something new. We haven't done this kind of video before. So if you do like it, let us know so you want to do more of them. And drop all your comments and questions down below, because we could make a part 2 with all the questions and replies we get in the comments of this video. Okay, so Luke Handley has asked, in my opinion, what is the best new feature of the last 5 years? And if you could add one, what would it be? There's plenty I could go into. I liked when they revamped the scouting, the dev center as a whole I quite enjoy, but I think the thing that's had the biggest effect, if you want to go down that route, at least if I'm thinking about the last few years, Dynamics has had a massive impact in Football Manager. You could argue now Dynamics is up there with the transfers that you make and the tactics you play in terms of how well your club does. Your club can tumble completely from bad dynamics and prosper under great dynamics. It's what happens in real life. You lose the dressing room, chances are you're out the door in a few weeks if you can't turn it around. So I do definitely enjoy the dynamic sides of things. Even if you don't have to keep on top of it all the time, the impact that it's having on your teams is very noticeable. So I do really like dynamics. Let me know your favorite thing. In terms of what they're going to do in future games, I think the game's in quite a good place in terms of the features it has. There's not too much more I think they could add. If I sat here for ages and tried to think of things, I'm sure I could, but right now I think I'm quite happy with the game. Based on all the stuff that came out about that dynamic youth rating stuff, I would say if they could make that actually work in the way that it's meant to, I would really like for that to be an actual working core feature of the game. So that's something that I'd like to see, but it doesn't seem to be fully working just yet in the way that people would expect. So that's something I'd like to see. And the final question comes from Spencer Taylor, and he says, what's the best tip you think that most people don't know about? If I'm thinking of a very quick one off the top of my head, it's the morale booster. So basically what this is if you see your players not on full morale, if you've got a big game coming up, or if you're in a bit of a slump, this is a quick thing you can do to just raise the morale of probably about half the players here if I did it to everyone. Basically, you go into a player, let's say Josko Gavardiol has fairly good morale right now. If I go into him, discuss, praise player, praise conduct, unless the player's been an idiot and not turning up to training and that kind of thing, most of the time praising conduct will make them give them a little pat on the back. So I say, yeah, well done on your conduct. And right now, I think that stayed the same based on the arrows, but sometimes you'll see it go up. So I'll try it with a couple of other players, just as an example. Now, I bet you this will be the time that it doesn't actually work, but hopefully it will. So if I go to Holzek, for example, he's not got the best morale right now. So if I say, there we go, it's gone up. So it's gone up by 1 tick just by saying that you've been doing good conduct recently. And that doesn't really mean anything. It basically just means they're not turning up to training. They're doing their job. Praise them, morale goes up. That could be the difference between you winning and losing a game in Football Manager. Again, all links back to dynamics and how important that is. Okay, there you go. We've answered some of your Football Manager questions. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Do let us know if you did. Feedback would mean a lot to us. Like the video if you enjoyed. Feel free to check out my Wolfsburg save on my channel link down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time, guys. Goodbye.